You're not welcome here. My mother's voice tore through the ballroom like a siren, sharp, scathing, impossible to ignore. Gasps shot across the room as she stepped forward, grabbed the crystal water pitcher from the front table, and flung the contents across the floor, soaking the front of my pale blue dress. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. She was only invited by mistake, she added, turning toward the crowd like she was some kind of martyr, lips curled in satisfaction. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or clap. So they clapped. Uncomfortably. I didn't blink. I didn't even flinch. Because deep down, I'd known this was coming. Not the water. Not the exact moment. But the venom? The public humiliation? That had always been my family's language. This was just a new chapter in the same twisted book they'd been writing since I was 15. I looked at my mother. Her perfectly curled hair, her pearl earrings, her pride swelling like she'd just saved the country from a scandal. Then I turned to my sister, Caroline, glowing on stage in her glittering dress, clutching her Philanthropist of the Year award like it was earned and not bought. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the water back. I could have said everything I wanted to say in all the years they'd tried to shrink me into silence. But I didn't. I smoothed my soaked dress, took a single step back, and said one thing. Enjoy your mistake. Gasps rippled again, but this time sharper. And just then the ballroom doors creaked open behind me. The music died. Footsteps followed, slow, firm, powerful. Every head turned toward the sound. And then they froze. He walked in like the air belonged to him. A tailored black suit, eyes like steel, calm as a storm about to break. He didn't look left or right, just straight ahead, straight toward the stage. The host fumbled with the mic. Caroline's smile cracked. My mother stiffened beside the board of directors. Because they recognized him. Caleb Whitaker, multi-city investor, reclusive billionaire, owner of 2 media conglomerates and 4 development firms. He hadn't returned their calls in months. And now he was here. He stepped onto the stage. The host moved aside like furniture. I'd like to take a moment, Caleb said, taking the mic without asking, to thank the person responsible for this evening. The real sponsor behind this entire event. He scanned the crowd, slowly, until his eyes met mine. My wife. No one clapped. No one breathed. You could have dropped a pin on the carpet and heard it bounce. Caroline's hand trembled around her award. My mother's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped forward. Calm. Silent. My dress still dripping. But somehow taller than I'd ever been. Because when they tried to humiliate me in front of the world, they had no idea they were setting the stage for me. No idea that the girl they shoved out of family photos had written the check that paid for the stage, the lights, and every plate of overpriced salmon. And definitely no idea that I'd married the man who now stood between them and their fake reputation. The same man they'd once called beneath us. But humiliation doesn't come out of nowhere. This wasn't just about tonight. This story started a long time ago, with whispered insults behind closed doors. With empty chairs at birthdays. With the quiet ache of being forgotten by your own blood. And tonight, that ache ended. Because I wasn't just here to be seen. I was here to shatter everything they thought they controlled. The silence didn't last. Not when the cameras started flashing. Not when reporters in the back whispered, "Did he say wife?" Not when the board members turned to each other in panic, realizing the woman they'd just dismissed was the one funding their entire night. Caroline's mouth twitched as she tried to steady her expression. Wife, she stammered into her mic, forced smile cracking like thin glass. Wait, Caleb, you're married to her? She couldn't even say my name. Typical. Caleb didn't hesitate. Yes, Caroline. My wife. Evelyn Whitaker. He said my full name deliberately, clearly, into the mic. The same way you'd say a brand before a billion-dollar merger. There was pride in it. Power. Intention. People started murmuring louder now, pointing, whispering behind manicured hands and designer clutches. And I just stood there, soaked in front of them all, completely unmoved. Because this was what they never expected. All these years, they'd painted me as the stray daughter, the awkward one, the girl who always looked like she didn't belong in their picture-perfect family photos. I was the quiet kid who liked books over parties. I wore hand-me-downs while Caroline had custom-tailored dresses. She got a car at 16. I got ignored. At family dinners, they asked her opinion on stocks and politics. They asked me to get more napkins. It was a game I stopped trying to win a long time ago. Instead, I built my own table. Quietly. Patiently. With every internship they mocked, every late-night class they didn't know I was taking, every rejection that hardened my spine. And then one day, by pure accident, or maybe fate, I met Caleb. I didn't know who he was at first. He was just a man sitting in the back of a lecture I was giving on urban redevelopment. I was one of 3 speakers at a real estate panel no one important was supposed to attend. But he listened. Really listened. 2 weeks later, I got a handwritten letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. From him. He said he saw something in me the world kept overlooking, and he wanted to help fund my project. What started as a business partnership turned into late dinners, deeper talks, shared silences. He never once asked about my family, never once cared about the legacy they paraded around like it was holy. He only cared about who I was becoming. And 6 months ago, quietly, without fanfare or dresses or flowers, we got married. No one knew, because no one ever asked about my life. They just assumed I had none worth asking about. Now they had their answer. Back in the ballroom, the host cleared his throat and tried to regain control. Ladies and gentlemen, let's return to our schedule. But Caleb raised his hand. One more thing. He turned toward Caroline, who stiffened like a statue. I was asked to speak tonight about the award recipient's philanthropic impact. But after reviewing the donations and partnerships, it became clear that someone else had done most of the work behind the scenes. He looked at me again. Evelyn created the framework. She built the team. And when the primary donor pulled out last month, she covered the entire gap without ever asking for credit. That was true. I hadn't told Caleb I funded it. I just couldn't watch the scholarships disappear, not when I knew what it was like to need a lifeline and have no one throw one. She didn't want to upstage anyone, Caleb continued. But the truth matters. So tonight, I'd like to officially rename this award, the Evelyn Whitaker Impact Award. A beat of silence. Then real applause. Louder. Longer. Genuine. And this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. I saw the moment Caroline realized it. The way her throat tightened. The way her hands dropped to her sides. The way she stepped back, off the stage, like the floor was suddenly too hot to stand on. My mother was already gone. Stormed out. Couldn't face it. Typical again. She was always the first to throw the match, but never strong enough to stand in the flames. I walked toward Caleb, and he offered his hand. I didn't take it. Instead, I stepped beside him, faced the audience, and said, "Thank you for the applause. But the truth is, I didn't build any of this for recognition. I built it because I know what it's like to be invisible in a room full of people clapping for the wrong things." Then I turned and walked off stage. Not out of shame, not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to prove. Not to them. Not anymore. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was avoiding anyone, but because I wasn't done yet. Caleb had a suite upstairs in the same hotel. When I entered, he was already pouring tea, like the chaos downstairs hadn't just shaken a foundation built over 2 decades of favoritism, lies, and selective memory. "You okay?" he asked gently. I peeled off the damp dress, wrapped a robe around myself, and sat on the edge of the bed. "That wasn't revenge," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Wasn't it?" "No. That was me reclaiming the ground they buried me under." I exhaled. Revenge still needs to come. And it would. Because humiliating me in front of donors, cameras, and CEOs wasn't the worst thing my family had done. They had trained the world to believe I was nothing. It started when I was 8. Caroline won her first academic medal, and Mom threw her a full garden party with violinists and catered cupcakes. When I got accepted into an advanced art program, I brought home the letter with trembling hands. You know what she said? Don't get your hopes up. Those kinds of things are for real artists. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years. They never raised their voices. No outright cruelty. Just a long, slow drip of subtle shame. The kind that seeps into your spine and teaches you to shrink. At 16, I worked part-time after school. When my father found out, he told me it made the family look poor. At 17, Caroline crashed her BMW into a light pole, and Mom told the press, "She's a little stressed. Genius girls have pressure." When I missed one scholarship interview because I had the flu, she said, "See, this is why we don't count on Evelyn for big things." And I believed it. For years. Until I left. I moved to another city, with one suitcase and no plan. I worked at a bookstore during the day and took community college classes at night. I rented a one-bedroom apartment with a leaking roof. My phone was prepaid. My shoes had holes. And I've never felt freer. Because no one expected anything. Which meant I could build everything. Back in the hotel suite, I stared out at the skyline, Caleb silent behind me, always giving space when I needed it. "I'm not done," I told him. He nodded. "I know. I want to take back what they think they own. Not just tonight. Everything. The narrative. The legacy. Their influence." Caleb sat beside me. "You want to go public?" I nodded slowly. "Not for drama, but for truth. I want to show people what happens when the girl they silence decides to speak." He smiled, not smugly, but with the quiet pride of someone who's watched someone survive what should have broken them. Then he said, "Then let's burn the blueprint they used to erase you." The first spark happened 2 weeks later. Caroline posted a reel on social media thanking her amazing sponsors for the event. She didn't mention Caleb. She didn't mention me. In fact, she made it sound like she funded the night herself. The comments lit up. People started asking why Caleb Whitaker, an executive known for never showing up at public ceremonies, had suddenly appeared at hers. One journalist asked politely on Twitter if she could clarify her connection to him. Caroline deleted the tweet, then blocked the reporter. 2 hours later, a different journalist reached out to me, and I said yes. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't bitter. I told my story the way it had unfolded, one cold moment at a time. I described being treated like a burden, having achievements dismissed, standing in the shadow of a sister who never once asked how I was doing outside the holiday photo frame. I didn't attack. I didn't even name names. But I didn't have to. The timeline, the details, the context, it all pointed exactly where it needed to. The story went viral within a day. The headline read, "Enjoy your mistake, the silent sister who funded her family's legacy, then took it back." I didn't read the comments. But Caleb did. He told me the responses were mostly kind. People who'd lived through the same quiet erasure. People who remembered being the family's scapegoat. People who said they finally saw themselves in someone who wasn't bitter, but better. I didn't cry. Not until the third day, when I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No signature. Just a note. It said, "I used to think I was invisible too. You reminded me I'm not." And suddenly, that was worth more than any award they ever handed out to Caroline. 3 days after the story exploded, my mother called. I let it ring. She tried again, then again. Each time, the same number. No voicemail. Just the ringing. I didn't answer. Because I already knew what she wanted. Not to apologize. Not to take accountability. But to manage the damage. And I was done being managed. Later that evening, I stood in the mirror adjusting my navy pantsuit. Caleb watched from the doorway, his tie still loose around his neck. "You sure you want to do this interview?" he asked. I met his gaze. They told their story for 20 years. I never even got 5 minutes. He didn't argue. The studio was downtown, bright lights and makeup chairs. A respected host. A live audience. No room for edits or spin. When I walked on set, the applause was real this time.
Not awkward. Not forced.
Just real. The host leaned forward, voice soft but firm. Evelyn, you shocked the country. But this wasn't just about a ceremony. This was personal. Why speak now? I took a breath. My family loved the idea of image, of perfection. But I was never part of that picture. I was tolerated until I wasn't. I didn't come here to destroy them. I came here to reclaim myself. The audience went quiet. I kept going. For years, I believed I was the problem.
Too quiet.
Too different. Too ordinary. But the truth is, I was just inconvenient to their story. The host blinked. And what would you say to your mother or sister now? I didn't hesitate. Nothing. Because this was never about what they think. It's about what I finally see clearly, that I never needed their validation. Just my voice. That night, I received one message from Caroline. You really couldn't just let me have one night? I stared at the text, rereading it once. I didn't reply. Because it wasn't her night. It never really had been. It was just another moment borrowed from someone else's silence. And I wasn't staying silent anymore. A month passed. Not one word from my mother after the story aired. No apology. No denial. Just silence. The kind that comes when control slips out of someone's hands and they don't know how to survive without it. Caroline, on the other hand, did what she always did when things didn't go her way. She pivoted. Rebranded. Her online bio suddenly said, Advocate for Women's Voices. Her next public post used the hashtag #SisterStrong. She never tagged me. Never called. But I wasn't surprised. That's who she had always been. Image over truth. Style over substance. Spotlight over soul. I wasn't interested in playing catch-up with a version of her that didn't exist. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Girls from schools I'd once mentored reached out. Small nonprofits asked me to speak. A scholarship fund was started in my name, entirely without my request. Just people moved by a story they said felt like theirs. I wasn't famous. I was visible. There's a difference. And for someone who spent her entire life being politely ignored, it was the first time I felt like I mattered for who I actually was. One afternoon, I walked past my childhood home. The paint was still pristine. The lawn clipped to perfection. Wind chimes twinkled near the porch. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to be let in. I had already walked away and built something better. Caleb met me at the gate, holding 2 cups of coffee. You sure about this? He asked. I nodded. I don't want anything from them. I just wanted to see it one last time. Then I dropped the envelope. Inside were old photos, me at school events they never attended, awards they never celebrated, letters they never opened. Proof I was never the ghost they pretended I'd been. I didn't write a letter to go with it, because I'd already said everything I needed to the world, to myself. Weeks later, a reporter asked if I had any final thoughts now that the headlines had died down. I smiled and said, yes, just one. They leaned in, waiting for some last dig at my family. But all I said was, sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting louder, it's never needing to be in the room again. And that was it. Not a scandal. Not a scene. Just the sound of a woman finally free. A woman who walked away soaked in water, but left them drowning in truth.